Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ethos Online. Again, this is a space where we can be, belong, and become the very best version of ourselves. So, we continue to move through these really difficult chapters. Some of them seem really boring. Other times some of you have said, wow, I can't believe we've pulled that much out of a couple verses. But here's the beauty for me, the reason we do this. We forget this book we call the Bible. This compilation of all of these wisdom writings, stories, metaphor, all of it. We forget this was not written to us in the 21st century, right? It was not written to Christians even, right? It was not written to American Western civilization. This was not, right? This was a book, a compilation of pieces written by and to a Hebrew population, which we call these people again today Jewish, right? And so again, if you don't understand who they are, what they believed, what they didn't believe, if we don't understand the language, all of those things, there's so much we miss. And so I was thinking about this, an analogy, it would be like me today, if I wrote a book to my kids. Right? If I wrote this book and I said, how to be a kid, right? And I wrote all these great pieces about my life growing up, and I gave it to my kids, and my kids loved it, and they experienced it. They experienced what it meant to be a werfel, right? What it meant to be a kid again. They gathered elements of what it meant to be part of this family. And so that book, though, watch me now, that book, it travels space and time. And let's say 1,000 years later, a group of people pick up this book. And when they look at this book, they don't have all the context of me or my kids or any of those things. And so they pick up this book and they might have the very real temptation to literalize certain things, right? They might have the temptation to take certain things out of context. And what if they don't have the resources to pick up all the context, pick up all the research? Well, if they don't, they're going to create meaning from what they have today, right? Or during that time era, 1,000 years later. And so again, this is what we see with the Bible. And so that's why, again, I think it's so important that we do the research, we do the study, we ask the difficult questions. And sometimes we hold interpretations lightly. Right? We've talked about atonement theories, character of God, the various stories that sometimes are literalized, sometimes are not. We hold it lightly, those interpretations, and then we study. And when we find truth and meaning, and it doesn't match with what we have, we've held it lightly so that we're able to say, that's okay, right? It actually has more meaning now. When we're able to approach the Bible in that way, the whole thing opens up, right? We don't have to have arguments so much about, this group is right and this group is wrong. No, we can hold it lightly. We can say, we're doing the study. We're diving in fully. And so at Ethos, that's what we do. And again, that's why these videos, they take a while to build, right? We do so much study. We do so much research, and we take time to find application. And so if you want to continue walking with us in this, please consider sharing these videos, right? Share the videos, go on to Ethos, donate, do what you can to help support this. I really do believe at some point, this whole series we're doing is going to just hit. People are going to begin to really connect with it. And I think it's already beginning to happen. But it's so exciting to me to walk with you in this journey over delving into finding real meaning, real value from a very ancient book. And so, again, we always talk about this when we talk about Genesis, right? We remind you it was compiled 587 BC, right? Torah, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. It was compiled when they were in Babylonian captivity. And the whole purpose of it was to say, we want to hold on to our identity, right? We're not going to assimilate like all the other tribes. And so Torah, whenever Torah was brought out, right, on these ancient scrolls, there was celebration, right? This was a beautiful piece that was reminding them who we are, who we aren't, where we should be heading, where we shouldn't, right? That was the whole point of this beautiful piece. And so it's poetry, it's song, it's mythology, right? Some people don't like to use that word, but it is. Sometimes they're giant fish stories. Right? A person swallowed by a whale. We understand today, if you are swallowed by an actual whale or a large fish, the stomach acids alone after a couple minutes are going to kill you. right? So we understand some of these things. We understand when Jonah goes to the bottom of the ocean, and the word is Sheol. When he goes to Sheol, which means death, right? We understand the idea was not that Jonah literally dies. It was that Jonah, an element of Jonah, his pride, his need to get revenge, those elements of him, they die there at the bottom. And when he comes back up, right, this rebirth idea, which is very prevalent in these stories, when he experiences rebirth, he's a new person. He's able to go and share a new hopeful message to his neighbors. It's beautiful, right? So we understand mythology. We understand prophetic musings where the wisdom writers, the wisdom voices, they stand at a distance and they watch and they say, oh, we did this before. I've seen this in my past, in my experience. Let me warn you now that if you do this, this and this might happen. Right? And again, the wisdom voices are so valuable to Hebrew culture. But to our culture, we don't always value them, do we? We like to hear what's new and what's sexy, right? Our models and everyone, the people we're listening to are the 20-year-olds, right? And it's like, whoa, wait a second. What do the 70, 80-year-olds have to say about relationships, right? What wisdom do they have? But we often throw them out, but not the Hebrews. Those voices are so crucial to them in understanding their stories. And then lastly, again, prophetic warnings. These are kings saying, look, be very careful, right? We've been here before. Be very careful. Don't go that direction. I see us moving in a bad direction, right? Jeremiah reminding his people, we're going to go into captivity again. Let's prepare. And then you have the counter voice. No, it's totally fine. Just keep doing what you're doing, right? No problem. Don't listen to those voices. We'll do it differently, right? We've done this in the past before. We've seen that it failed before. Don't worry, we're going to do it differently. And Jeremiah says, no, we're heading in the same direction again. Listen to the wisdom voices, the prophetic warnings, right? So this is what Torah was. It was all of these combined. Yeah. And so again, Torah is a complete narrative. It's miniaturized, right? It's Israel miniaturized through every telling. So every time you see a name, a story, whatever it is, it's always going to have a connection to Israel, right? Who Israel is, who Israel isn't. And so let's look at Abraham, right? We look at the character of Abraham. Abraham means father, right? The founder, the one who begins the whole tradition. He steps away from the norm. He steps away and he heroically moves into something very different, something monotheistic, something with a different kind of story, the underdog story, right? That's the narrative, rebirth. This is Abraham, the founder. And so today we're going to look at chapter 21, 1 through 8, just 8 verses, but really a pretty beautiful story. So let's dive in. And again, one more reminder. Every time you read Abraham's story, remember, this is another telling. It actually follows exactly with the Exodus story, right? We step away from trials. We step away from Egypt, right? Bondage, slavery, brokenness, captivity, and we move into something bigger, right? And so before the wrath falls, before the pain falls, we step away. And so this is kind of the crux, the context of it. So here we go. Let's read it. And the Lord remembered Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did to Sarah as he had spoken. And Sarah conceived and bore a son to Abraham in his old age at the time of which God had spoken to him. And Abraham named his son who had been born to him, whom Sarah had borne to him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. And Sarah said, God has made joy for me. Whoever hears will rejoice over me. And she said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? For I have borne a son to his old age. And the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. So, on the surface, kind of boring, right? We've heard the story before, right? This old woman gives birth to a son, old age. We've heard these stories before, right? This is kind of a common story for the Hebrews, but there is something interesting here that I want to share. So we're going to go line by line, because again, that's what the Hebrews would do. A typical rabbinical moment, when a rabbi would come out and talk Torah, he would do this. He would sit on the stool and he would go line by line, and he would just bring up interesting elements, words, phrases, interpretations that he found interesting. And one of the most famous ones in the New Testament era was Hillel. Hillel was famous for this. He would stop and say, now this word, if you think about this word, it means this, but it could also mean this. And then he would bring up this really crucial idea about application, how to live it. And people gathered from all over to hear Hillel. And Hillel is most famous for, and again, you'll love this, Hillel is most famous for this moment where he says that the commandments really only boil down to love your neighbor and love your God, right? And you see Jesus' voice echoing this, right? Because that was a famous voice of Hillel. So again, interesting stuff here. This is how we move through the story. We go line by line, word by word. So here we go. And the Lord remembered Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did to Sarah as he had spoken. So remember this for a moment, right? The people reading this, compiling this, they are in Babylonian captivity, right? They're in the middle of this brokenness. What happened to our nation, right? All the prophets told us if we go this direction, we're going to become a crippled nation, right? Another nation is going to overpower us. We're going to become weak. And sure enough, it happened. And so they're stuck in Babylonian captivity. And so the beauty here, right? The beauty of this verse 1, is a reminder that, look, God's not forgotten, right? God has not forgotten you in this moment, even though you made some pretty poor choices, even though you went the wrong direction, right? You chose to repeat certain cycles of brokenness. God's not forgotten you. Your story is not over. There is a second verse to your song, right? And so it's the dominating theme of Genesis over and over again. And the reminder is, hey, hold on, right? Hold on, don't give up. There's going to be new birth, right? The story, even though it feels like it's ending, it's actually the very beginning, because there's going to be rebirth again. Do you remember this guy here? This is Lance Armstrong. And I know, like right now, we're in the middle of the Olympics, and it's fascinating to me. This individual, so heroic in so many ways. And then, of course, yes, there was like the questions of drug abuse and this and that. Then you dig into what cycling is, and you find out everyone's doing something, right? So anyways, either way, Lance Armstrong was an incredible individual. When you read about his story, you find the guy actually had cancer. Right? Had cancer. And he, after all this chemotherapy, most people thought his career's over, right? Body crippled, right? His muscles just gone, deteriorating. And what he did is he said, I'm not going to give up. And so Armstrong, what he did is he built back, right? He started cycling harder. His workout regimens were even harder. And so he started working, fighting back. Until at one point they say that because of the cancer, he actually built back stronger muscles, right? He was a stronger athlete, many believe, after the cancer than before. And so Armstrong, what he does is he fights so hard, he doesn't give up, and he rises from the ashes, right? It's one of those stories, even though it seems like hope is gone, right? I'm in the middle of all the pain, the brokenness, the sadness, the defeat. The Armstrong story is so beautiful because he doesn't give up. He presses on. And there is literally new birth for his body. Yeah, it's a great story. It reminds me of this. Ancient cultures, they had this story, right? Most empires, they had this story. And this story maybe wasn't the Abraham story. It was different stories. Whether you were a Greek, a Roman, if you were in the Tao dynasty, wherever it was, right? You had stories like this. And one of the most famous ones is, of course, the phoenix, right? So ancient Egypt, they had this story. They were one of the first that really developed the story. They believed that this bird would live 500 years. But at the close of the 500 years, there's always death, because that's kind of how life is, right? It would die. But in its death, it would burst into flames. And the flames would offer a new birth, right? It would start the life cycle again. And so this is actually how Egypt viewed themselves. They understood that empires rise, empires fall. But they believed that their empire would rise, it would fall, but when it fell, in the middle of those low moments, it would rise again, right? And so understand this, when Israel is reading this story about the new birth, in the middle of Babylonian captivity, they're remembering this. This is their story. Their tribe rises and falls, rises and falls. But when you are in the trench, right, when you're in the low moment, your tribe will rise again. Right? It is just the cyclical moment, the cyclical idea of what empires, what tribes do, right? And I think for individuals, it's the same thing, right? Through pain, through brokenness, there's new life. I wanted to put a twist on this as well. I love these two pictures. These pictures are awesome. Anyone who's ever gone through birth, right, you will find this picture funny. On the left side, there's a picture of Hollywood's idea of like what a birth looks like. Right? It's beautiful. It's the two are smiling. She looks so happy. The baby, of course, is an older baby, right? This is not a newborn, right? We know this, but we subconsciously just kind of buy it. But then there's this picture on the right. This actually went viral. This woman said, "Sweetie, take a picture of me in my diapers." Right? This is not a sexy picture. And the individual who did this, she wanted to show birth is messy. Right? Women tear. There's a lot of chaotic moments. It's messy. It's painful. It's chaotic. Right? This is what birth looks like. There's a very real picture here on the right. And this is why I think so many people caught on to this, is that it is painful. It's frustrating. It's messy, but it's also one of the most beautiful moments. Right? Beautiful new life happens out of the lows, right? Out of the brokenness, after the cancer, right? After the brokenness, after the captivity, new life always emerges. It does, even though it's chaotic and messy. And this is what Israel is going through. And this is why this story would cause them all to lean in a little more. Yeah. Verse 2. We're only on verse 2. Yeah. Sarah conceived and bore a son to Abraham in his old age at the time of which God has spoken to him. So rabbinical interpretation on this is that, again, new births are miraculous, right? There's a reason why it's so old age. Was he really 100 or not? I don't know, right? There's a lot of these stories. I don't know. But the idea, the reason for even sharing that is that it's miraculous. There were divine hands involved, right? That's the idea. It's God intervening. It's a God thing. It's a God moment. And so one of the rabbinical voices says this: Yahweh comes to us in many forms, but the most beautiful of all is the victory stories, when one overcomes adversity. In this moment, we see the shadow of the divine one bringing life to our stories. Yeah, I think that's beautiful. You ever have those moments where like hope just feels lost, right? Somehow like, I don't know that things are going to turn around. We've had those moments, all of us, right? To be human is to have those moments. We have them. You can't pinpoint how you got there, right? But you know that this turnaround is nothing short of a miracle. Things shifted, they turned. And in that moment, for the Jewish people, they would say, this was God passing by, right? This is God giving us a glimpse of his being, his, her, it being. It's that moment, right? God passes by and reminds us there's a deeper narrative. There's a deeper purpose. We're going to get through it. That is the idea behind it's 100 years, right? It's she was too old to bear. It's miraculous. Right? Any moment where you step away from the cancer, you rebuild the body, you get through the birth, whatever it is, 9 months, right? It's miraculous. It's so miraculous. It's a miracle. Birth is a miracle. It's so good. Yeah. Verse 3. Abraham named his son who had been born to him, whom Sarah had borne to him, Isaac. Isaac. What does the name Isaac mean? Yeah, of course it's going to have meaning. Because in this story, right, they're writing this story, the name is going to coincide with what's going on in the story. Some would ask, well, does that mean there was an Isaac or not? Is that literal or not? I don't know. I don't know. But I'll tell you again, the reason they put the name Isaac there is because it connects with what's going on in the story. So here's what the name Isaac means. And I love this idea. Again, in Hebrew, we'll say things in English. We'll say, it's kind of like this, right? We'll talk about a word. The word, I don't have a word for it. It's kind of like when you do this, right? For the Hebrews, they had a word for it. Their words had such deep, beautiful meaning. And so you use the word. So Yishak, when God laughs or when a person is surprised, they laugh. You get me on this one? So it's that moment where you're like, oh, I didn't see that coming. Or like, whoa, I can't believe that thing just happened, right? I can't believe this is the beautiful moment, right? It's when we can't believe we won the trip. I just put my name in the raffle. I didn't know, right? But whoa, I just won that trip, right? That's what that feels like. I can't believe the check came just in time. Right? I can't believe the news came at just this right moment. I can't believe you called when I just thought about you, right? It's that laughter, that like, right? But there's also the double. It's the idea that the divine is watching, right? The divine is watching and saying, oh, watch this now. Yes. Tony just stood up. He did the thing, the heroic thing. The laughter, the excitement, right? The father just saying, that's my kid, right? That's what this meaning is. That word, again, one word has so much depth. And so this word, this name, right? Yishak, right? There is so much beauty, so much depth to it. It's a divine thing. It's the moment when you say, whoa, like that was pretty big. That was funny. That was interesting. That was divine. That's what Isaac meant. Cool, right? We'll continue. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. So we've talked about circumcision, right? Circumcision is this differentiating marker, right, for tribes. This is saying he is an Israelite. He is a Hebrew, right? He's one of us. That's the idea there. 8 days. Again, important. This 8 days is it's the infinite, right? It's a God number, right? So waiting 8 days, there's this marker, this idea that Isaac's going to do big things, right? So Israel, you are going to do big things in the world. You have the differentiating marker, right? You are going to look, act differently, and it's going to be a difference that's going to make positive shifts in the world. So that the marker has been placed on Isaac, just like it's been placed on you, Israel. Yeah, kind of cool. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born. So watch this now. 100. Yes, it's a miraculous number, but also remember too, 120 is actually when one like has reached like the infinite amount of wisdom one will have, right? That's what that concept means. So 100 is pretty close to wisdom, right? Perfect wisdom. So the idea again, when you have the wisdom, you can appreciate the gift all the more. Think about like Christmas. My family, we didn't have a lot of money growing up. And so when I got those gifts when I was young, I didn't stop and say, oh my word, thank you so much for this. You must have sacrificed so much, mom and dad. I can't thank you enough, right? A 5-year-old doesn't do that typically. Most 5-year-olds are not doing that. They don't understand, appreciate the amount of effort and time it took to stand in line at that Best Buy for 2 hours, right? They're just happy for the gift. I got the gift. I got the dino, right? Whatever it is. But with maturity, right? Here's the beauty of it. With maturity, with time, if you've been stuck in captivity for a certain amount of time, when you're finally given the gift of rebirth, freedom, whatever it is, you appreciate it all the more. Yeah. Think about generationally, right? We've had certain generations living in freedom for a very long time. And I think sometimes we forget how we got here, right? We forget what it took to experience, we live in a nice house, right? Or middle class house. But we forget that like the generations before us, they didn't live in much. Think about my own grandparents. When they first got here from Germany, they lived in a shed, a shack. And I forget that sometimes, that like my family had to fight tooth and nail, work so hard to get where we were, to where I was one of the first to go to university, right? These are things that we forget, but when with wisdom comes an opportunity to deeply appreciate the gifts and the miracles that we experience. And sometimes you can only fully appreciate it with some time and some texture. And that's the beauty of this moment here. Your freedom moment, Israel, when you leave captivity from Babylon, is going to be so sweet for some of you that are a bit older. It's going to mean so much more than maybe for the 10, 12, 15, 16, 20-year-olds. It's not going to mean as much as it might to someone who's gone through it, right? Beautiful. Yeah. Here we go. And Sarah said, God has made joy for me. Whoever hears will rejoice over me. And she said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children, for I have borne a son to this old age? Again, made joy for me. I think this is such a cool idea here. Made joy for me. The idea here in the Hebrew is, now that I've gone through the thing, now that I've had to fight tooth and nail, I've gone through these 9.5 months of just pain, discomfort, all those things. Now that there's been birth, my identity connects with joy rather than suffering. Yeah, kind of a cool idea. I identify my story has changed, right? I'm in a place of joy now because I've moved through the discomfort, through the chaos, through the brokenness. My identity has changed a bit. It's a really cool idea. And then lastly, and the child grew up and was weaned. And Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. So understand this. If you're a Hebrew, if you're a Jewish person, you are always looking for reasons to party, right? So that's the reason there's so many celebrations. And again, I find this interesting. Some denominations will they'll kind of cherry pick what things they do, right? Well, we'll keep the Sabbath. Well, we'll keep this. We'll keep that. The reality is the Jewish people, they kept so many different things, right? So many different festivals, celebrations, rituals, and all of them connected, though, to community. And so as the child grows, as the blessing grows, we celebrate certain things to remind us of the blessing, right? It's such a cool idea. And again, one I think many Christians today, they kind of miss out on, right? There's so many ways and reasons to celebrate together in community, but often we kind of forget those. And so he, first off, brings together community to say, let's take time to remember the blessing. Right? And then there's this word weaned. We don't use this word very often in our culture, do we? Weaned. Here's what the word weaned meant. Among many early people groups for whom life was monotonous, any milestone could be made an occasion for celebration. Weaning, therefore, was a step up for a baby to a young child. So this could be anywhere from 3 to 9. So basically, it's from infant stage to childhood. And so anyone who's had kids, you know this, right? You've seen the shift. It's hard sometimes in those first couple of years. It's hard. They are so dependent on you, right? Those early stages of that blessing that's been given you, right? Those early stages, it's a lot of work, right? Waking up constantly, the butt crack of dawn or whatever. You're waking up every 3 hours to feed, to rock, to calm, right? You're hearing the scream and you're like, why are they screaming? I don't know. You're trying to figure out why they're screaming. You're moving through it. But those new ages, 3 to 9, there's some independence, right? They're beginning to use more verbal skills. They're potty training, right? All of these things. This is a blessing, right? And so the nation is going to experience this too. Right? The Hebrew nation, you're stepping into freedom soon. And you're going to have some growing pains, some shifts, some turns. You are going to be independent. That's the idea. It's going to take time, though, isn't it? Yeah, it's going to take time. It's going to take patience. Sometimes we have to wait for the blessing. Sometimes we have to sit. Sometimes we have to wait. Sometimes we have to prepare. These are all things that this story kind of reminds us of. So for Israel, The story here is that sometimes we have to step back. We have to remember these miraculous stories of our past, right? We have to remember where God intervenes. Sometimes it takes longer. Sometimes it's not our time, right? Remember those Yizdek moments, right? Those Isaac moments. Those are the things that are going to sustain us, right? At some point, we'll be able to stand back and kind of smile, be like, oh, it did come at just the right moment, didn't it? The job offer came at the very last minute. We've seen this before. They'll offer patience that's going to move us through any disappointment, burden, trial. These are the things. Patience will get us there. Sometimes we have to learn patience. And so the takeaway for me in this section was practicing patience. And so Greg Bell, he brings up 5 different ideas of how to begin to practice patience. And so I wanted to share those with you because I read through some of his concepts in his book, and I thought these 5 are really helpful. And I want to begin practicing this week. And so maybe you too can practice this as well. So number 1 is this. If you want to start practicing patience, do this. Take the long view when you're making decisions. Because I get it. Like, if you need the job and you need it now, right? It's so easy to quickly make knee-jerk reaction decisions and get into something you may not love. And so taking the long view is asking questions like, how is this going to play out a year from now, 5 years from now, right? Nobody has an accurate crystal ball. And so taking a long view is going to help us be more patient in how we deal with things. Is this really what I'm going to love, or do I need to wait for a better fit? Right? Maybe relationally, you're just like, I just need to have a partner. So I'll settle for that, right? But settling for that for how long, right? Are you going to get stuck in something you're unhappy with? Take the long view. That's one way to practice patience, according to Bell. Another one, create a buffer between activities. This one I thought, I don't understand this, but here's what this means. When you rush directly from one activity to the next, it's likely that you're going to get a bit anxious. And so your mind, it needs and deserves a break. And so before you switch gears, right, from this thing to that thing to this thing to that thing, whether it's 15 minutes or it's an hour or it's a week or a month or whatever it is, create a buffer between these things in your mind so you can refresh. So again, if you're leaving a job you hate, don't immediately jump into another one, right? Take a little bit, a couple days if you can, right? To buffer, to figure out what worked, what didn't work, process, right? You need some time in between. When you're taking time to consider this patience, this will help you build patience. It really will. I love the idea. I'm going to practice it this week. Another one, be a patient listener. This is so hard, right? When you are feeling anxious, when you're in the middle of Babylonian captivity and you want to get out, right? It's so hard to hear people say, hey, just take it easy, right? Hey, better things are coming. Because in your mind, they're not, right? In your mind, you've got it figured out. You know your anxiety level, they don't. You know your story, you're assuming they don't. But allow a pause. When someone's sharing something with you, take a pause, listen, internalize what they're saying, and then before you even answer, just be slow to the response. After they say the thing, just take a minute, reflect, think about what was said. Is there anything helpful there? Sometimes there is, but sometimes we get so impatient, we're not able to really listen. And so I thought that's a really beautiful piece of advice too. Number 4, practice patience. Seems simple, right? Identify your, he calls it a frequent flyer. And these are things that you tend to lose patience over the most. And so create a plan is what he's basically saying here. Create a plan on how you're going to approach each situation and act more patiently. So maybe it's your kid, and this kid is constantly just doing things that trigger you. Take time, create a plan. When they do the thing they're probably going to do, create a different plan, a strategy on how to practice patience with them, how to practice patience with the boss, how to practice patience when you're in the middle of all of the crises that you will inevitably have. And then lastly, it was this: seek to reduce your stress. right? That should be an obvious one, but I don't think many of us do that. I definitely don't. And so this one was stress and like impatience, they go hand in hand, don't they? And so if you want to become more patient, you need to manage your stress better. And so this means adopting regular stress management techniques. So whether it's yoga, devotionals in the morning, learning to breathe, mindfulness techniques, whatever it is, whatever works for you, do the thing. Right? And don't do it and then like, oh, I'll just take a break for a day. A day becomes 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. Make sure this becomes a life practice for you. Because when we get into this practice, whether it's working out, again, breathing, whatever it is, get into the practice of it. Because when the impatience wants to kind of peek its head, we're able to say, no. I'm grounded. I'm patient. I can handle this. So good, right? So again, this all coming from 8 different verses. So much beauty here. Israel is in a place where they have to learn patience. They have to settle because they know at some point rebirth will happen. But in the midst of it, let's have some patience. Let's take some calm. Let's breathe. As always, ethos-church.org/donate. Please partner with us. This is so much fun to do every week. I look forward to finding different ways, finding different interpretations, finding applications to all of it. It is so good. If you want to join us in live sessions, please email us. Let us know. Ethos Living Rooms. So much fun. And as always, subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. Share the video. Let's continue building this in this new year. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. This was a lot of fun. Chapter 28, 1 through verses 8. So good. We'll continue on next week in chapter 21. For now, everyone, have a great day, and we'll see you next week.